Campaign management is one of the strengths of the Fantasy Grounds framework. Fantasy Grounds lets you record lots of different data types, such as story entries, encounters, monsters, maps, items, and over time the number of entries is going to build up and present challenges to you in keeping all this data under control or keep it in an organised fashion. For me, the story entry is one of the most useful entries, being that it's so versatile. You've got lots of different types of information that can go in there. You've got GM only information, you've got descriptive type information, chat dialogues, you've got links, and all of these sorts of things make the story entry very flexible. In a text-only game, you're going to find that this is really critical, that you have this sort of information prepped in advance, because typing out a full room description or typing out a lengthy monologue from one of your key NPCs is going to really slow your game down. So if you can have this sort of information ready to deliver to the players with a couple of clicks of the mouse, it's going to help keep your game moving at a decent speed. Having these entries in the chat window allows the players to go back and reference them. Later on they might find another clue which makes earlier information make more sense, or they might want to check what somebody new is telling them and match it up against the information they've received earlier. Having, again, that reference source in the chat window is ideal. When creating new story entries, I'll typically create an introduction or an index entry for each section of story that I'm going to be presenting, and in this index I will include links to most of the relevant information that's going to occur in that section of the adventure. These links might be other story entries, there might be maps, there might be encounters, and that's one of the great things about the story entry, it's quite flexible. As you can see with this introduction page, I've got links to various different types of information. I've got a map, I've got some story entries, I've got an encounter, I've got even a spell from the Castles and Crusades handbook. You can see here I am delivering some descriptive text and some chat text. I'm opening up that spell from the Castles and Crusades handbook. So this is really quite a useful entry. Here I'm going to add an image back into this list, into these links, so you can see how easily these links can be set up and how useful they are to link to all the different types of information that you need in your campaign. Another thing that I find really useful when I'm setting up these story entries is to number them. So by numbering them, I can set the order that I want them to appear in. They don't appear alphabetically, which is the default view. I want these entries to be roughly in the order that I think that they're going to occur in. Now you can see this entry is 0-01, so that's basically 0. The first 0 is for it's the opening scene for background information, and then the 01 is just the first entry. So using this method I'll have a number of different scenes or settings or locations, and each of those will have a different initial prefix followed by a unique number for each of the individual entries that occur during that scenario. Another handy tip for working through large lists of story entries is the search button. Simply type in one or more keywords from the entry that you're looking for, and that'll narrow down the list considerably. Moving on to images, you can see that when I've created my images, I've actually created them with a name that's descriptive and specific to the type of image. So I've got an item called Graven Stone, an item secret note, map cryptic decor, scene nightfall, NPC decor, weapon golden dark. So all of these things tell me exactly what that type of image is going to be showing. And again, you'll see where this makes sense really is when we go and stick these as shortcut pins on a map. Now the first thing I do when I open up this map is I right click on it and go to layers, then enable the shortcuts, and that allows me to see all the pins that I've already stuck onto this map. And we can see our hero Calistan is just entering the room, and straight away as a GM I can see that there's a number of pins in this room containing different types of information. If I putting my mouse over the top, I can see a story entry, I can see an encounter, and I can see an item. So that straight away gives me a stack of information about this room. I know that I'm going to probably run the descriptive text first, but I also know that there's an encounter that's going to happen in this room, and that encounter might happen straight on the back of the descriptive text, or once I read through the rest of the information here, I see that it actually happens a little bit later on once the sarcophagus ensorcels the characters and distracts them. You can see at the bottom of my descriptive text, I've actually got a link to the encounter. I like to put links to the information in lots of different places, just so whichever method I'm using at the time, I can find the information I need. Now, we could open up the encounter from there, but we're demoing the shortcut pin, so we're going to open up the encounter off the map. Clicking on that, I get to see the information for the encounter. I see that there's a giant constrictor snake and Dagor himself, and when I click add encounter to the combat tracker, straight away my pre-prepped encounter fully populates the battle map, and it also populates the combat tracker. I'll make the combatants visible, or at least I'll make this constrictor snake visible, because according to my scenario, the constrictor snake attacks first while the characters are ensorcelled, and then once the players are distracted by the snake, Dagor enters the fray. So my main tips for campaign management are to use the story entries, to label all the data that you input into your adventure in a way that works for you, using prefixes, using numbers, using different tabs. All of those sorts of things work differently for different people, but using the links in story entries to bring it all together, and using the pins or shortcuts to create visual links to your scenario really work well for me, particularly the maps. As your players move around the town or the forest or the dungeon and you can see pins on the map, you can really quickly bring that information up and know exactly what's coming up next.